This podcast is brought to you by the Prospect Research Institute, a vibrant online learning community providing high-quality educational content, the opportunity to connect with peers, and an outlet for new ideas in the field of nonprofit fundraising research.
And I think for a researcher, it's really important to understand the filter bubble and how these algorithms are affecting their own results, and that you have to monitor and constantly clean your machines.
Welcome to Prospect Research Chat Bites, a podcast by and for prospect research professionals. I'm Jennifer Filla. Today, I'm talking with Martin O'Donohue, Director of Prospect Research at James Madison University.
Hi, Martin. Thank you for joining us on Chat Bites.
Happy to be here.
Now, I know we've talked about data and privacy, and I want to get there. But first, I thought it would be great to learn a little bit more about you and how you got into prospect research. Would you be willing to share your backstory?
I would love to. At one time in my life, I was a lawyer. I worked in Europe for a while as a antitrust attorney, working in European community law. And for love, I moved to Charlottesville, Virginia, and that sort of changed things for me a bit. And there was a law book publisher in Charlottesville that I started to work with, working with international law. And they were owned by a paper company because the paper company thought in the future there wouldn't be any more paper, so they bought LexisNexis. And I began working for LexisNexis. And then there was another merger. So I am a survivor of mergers. And they thought it'd be great if I moved to Dayton, Ohio. But the love of my life decided that we would stay in Charlottesville. And all of a sudden, I had to figure out what my career would be instead of writing books about international law or something like that. I ended up at the McIntire School of Commerce working in their research and fundraising division. And that's how I got into prospect research. I was working with a wonderful man, Dean George Overstreet, who essentially taught me how to look and research high capacity donors and what I was supposed to look for. And then I moved to Harrisonburg, Virginia, and began with the Office of Prospect Research here at James Madison University, where essentially I have done just about everything. I'm now the director. So that's how I got into prospect research. And one of the real driving forces I was interested in systems and how things work. That's what drove me to antitrust law and international law. It was very interesting on how these systems works. And that continues to be my intellectual pursuit, is looking at systems, how they work, and what their real impact, or how they essentially disrupt things or change things within the environment. So you see these constant environmental changes, and that's what really drives me, is learning about these systems.
That is really neat. I can't believe you came from law. I think there's quite a few out there.
Well, I started off in economics.
Well, this is a perfect storm for prospect research.
There you go.
Economics, law, and systems.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, systems now means data. You know, we are dealing in a world of data, and we have to manage that.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you think about data as not just a piece of information in a little number, but as how it moves, and it has a behavior, which is really the interesting part of it.
Yes, indeed. Because what I really want to hear from you, I'm hoping you'll explain to us, is about the filter bubble. So we have access to so much data through search engines that index the internet for us.
Mm-hmm.
But there have been changes. Big companies like Google and Facebook are altering what we see. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Well, my epiphany on a filter bubble was one day I was looking up a colleague, and I knew her first name, middle name, and last name, and she had moved to the United Kingdom. And of course, I went into Google, typed her name, and nothing came up. And then I typed her name and I put in LinkedIn because I knew she was a member of LinkedIn. Nothing came up, and I kept on, and then I put quotations around it. Then I moved out her middle name, and I couldn't find her. And then I went to a colleague down the hall. I said, "Could you search this?" And he did the same thing on Google and couldn't find it. And I kept on trying to figure out why I couldn't find her. And then I went in and I used Bing, and she was right at the top. And the fact was is I was using Google all the time. And so are my colleagues, and we discovered that using these search engines were narrowing and narrowing and narrowing the results to what we previously had researched. So we're narrowed to the geographical proximity of those things around us. We're narrowed to the content of our searches. I look for a hat. See, I got a hat. And then all of a sudden, for 3 weeks, there are advertisements for hats on the right side. So they're constantly doing this. And what we have discovered is that we constantly have to remove the cookies. We have to constantly look for switches to turn off certain privacy things like track cookies and turn them off on all our search engines. And we have to use several search engines to get the results we really need to look at. And it was a real epiphany to see the difference between what Google did and what Bing did because our past behaviors. And what we have to do is eliminate that. And then we did another test, is that we did the same search and we went home and did it on different IP addresses. Because we're doing all this work at this university and institution, all those people going through these IP addresses that are associated with this university also narrow the search. So essentially, because of our location, where we go through, everything is sort of narrowed and restricted to these ideas of data scientists writing algorithms. So we're constantly fighting data scientists and we want to be the data scientists. So it's very interesting on how that is coming about. And I think for a researcher, it's really important to understand the filter bubble and how these algorithms are affecting their own results, and that you have to monitor and constantly clean your machines, and then also change your IPs, which isn't easy when you're located in one institution unless you want to go out and spend money elsewhere. And we haven't really found a good way to change that where we have a independent IP address because IT doesn't like that and things like that.
No, they don't. The IP address is a very interesting thing. I have one laptop for my business and for me. And I've struggled with the filter bubble because if I want to look up a restaurant and, find some place to meet someone, I absolutely want that algorithm to help me locate something nearby. Mm-hmm. But if I'm doing research, I do not want it to narrow my search. Or if I'm traveling abroad, that's another issue. Google says, you're on the Italian server, and I'm going to give you Italian results.
Yeah.
So it's been a challenge. I think Google is starting to realize that people don't always want all the help it wants to give it. But yes, your IP address identifies you and then makes a mess of your results.
Yeah, it does.
Frustrating.
It does. And you have to be vigilant to go in there and make sure you're getting the correct results. And that gets to another issue, is that all of a sudden you can't use these open source data sites, and you have to go to the proprietary sites to get better data. That's a real issue. And each one of these proprietary information systems focus on one area, so you end up buying 1, 2, or 3 different areas to get the best of each one.
And by proprietary, you mean like the paid subscription tools,
Paid
like a donor
subscription.
search or iWave Pro?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
all those.
LexisNexis.
LexisNexis, yes, my former employer, yes. Uh-huh. Yes. And
Can you go ahead?
no, you go ahead.
Okay. I'm curious about the search engines you're using. I know I've been enjoying using DuckDuckGo, which tells me that I can search anonymously. What kind of search engines are you using to try to counter the filter bubble?
Well, we're using 4 of the basic ones, and one is DuckDuckGo. We're using Bing, we're using Google, and we're using Yahoo. And I have a choice, and I switch which one comes up first, randomly. And it's very interesting to see what comes up on for all 4, because they will all be sorted, and we'll get entirely different results just based on all 4 of those engines. And those are the basic ones. That now we do use search engines for specific tools like the SEC and things like that, but that's really a specific search engine. It isn't a broad one that goes over the internet and essentially looks at the internet as a whole. But those are the basics.
What about my rule of thumb has always been, or I've always told people, become a power user of one tool if you're stretched for time, so that at least you use one tool really well. And that's always been Google, because it has so many advanced operators that are fun and easy to use. Right. How do you cover that? Do you guys have like little cheat sheets on each of the different search engines, or how do you make sure you're good at all of them?
I think we just use standard Boolean searches for most of them, but again, for most users, at least in our shop, it's either Google or LexisNexis. I mean, those are the real power ones. The other ones we have are iWave that we use in certain situations, and then we have specific ones for the SEC. And we have to be masters at least of all of those. And the other ones, we use it more broadly. And that's usually to get those basic searches. But the common Boolean searches are common throughout all of those search engines. Some are better than others. Some are just open.
Yes, you get many results.
Yeah. Now, because I used to be a dot command person, if you know what dot commands were.
No.
In LexisNexis, you had to put in a dot / and to put in a search of words, and then the whole Boolean syntax to get your search back, and that's how you narrow the searches as you went through. So you'd put a W, which means within, and then a / and 3. Within 3 words, I want Miller. John, within 3, Miller, and baseball. So you find John Miller in baseball, and you find an announcer, and that's how you used to do things. And Google and other search try to make it easier and easier. And instead of having a power user, what they're doing is developing algorithms so that information is narrowed to your own behaviors. And I think that for the researcher, it's a hindrance. For the common person, I think it helps them. It causes a little disruption in political discourse, but that's just the world.
That's so true.
Yeah.
And you're right. The average user has no idea how limited their results are. They're just happy to find the restaurant, to locate the store or item that they want, unlike a researcher who is interested in many different countries and all kinds of industries. I've actually had Google do a strange thing where I was doing some really heavy searching for a period of time, and it kept asking me to prove I was a real person.
Really?
I was getting a little worried that maybe I had hit some level of search that they're now looking at what I'm doing.
Yeah. They think you're an automated worm in there trying to grab information. That's That's interesting. That has never happened to me. Never. So you must have been doing something wrong. Either that or it was
Clearly out of the norm.
NSA pretending to be Google.
See, I was worried. I was worried. It was a highly the people I was researching were highly political, so maybe that also.
Yes.
Big money, big politics.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Now, I would love it if we could have a little bit more of a discussion on data and privacy as a prospect research professional and also as a steward of donor data. Mm-hmm. So I know, for example, that you do not have a LinkedIn profile because, of course, I wanted to look at that before we talked. Yeah. What has led you to keep such a low profile online?
Researchers.
People like me.
Yeah, people like you looking things up. I just know how that data is used and how you're categorized, and it's just to reduce some of the requests that I get. And I did that because I can say that I'm me. You know, I work at James Madison University, but they don't need to know, or people outside don't really need to know unless they have a purpose for researching all that information. So personally, I'm not looking for a job, so I really don't want an employer to look me up. The people that I meet, we do, LinkedIn, and we do connect, and people that want to find me will find me. I'm not anonymous, so I'm just a low profile. And it just trying to remove all the noise that I have to deal with each day, because I want to eliminate all those vendors out there, and it's mostly a vendor thing. I respond to things on Prospect L and other things like that. Usually not publicly, but directly to the person asking the question. So it's mostly a low profile to keep low traffic. I don't want to be on the super highway. I like a nice country road.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
It is pretty intense.
Yeah.
When you have a lot of data out there.
Yeah.
You're right. You get on every list.
Get on every list, and you're on everybody's list, and they're sending you all this information. And I don't want to sit there for 20 minutes deleting things and then not reading them. So it's really a choice of getting the best type of information. That I guess I'm creating my own algorithm by limiting my
own bubble.
my own bubble. Everybody's running in bubble. I don't want a big bubble.
I want to turn that around now. So those are all very good reasons for keeping a low profile. You do not want someone to use that data for a purpose other than what you would like that purpose to be. So if you put it out there on LinkedIn, maybe you're looking for a job, but you're not, so you don't want that information out there. So many of our high net worth donors and prospects are the same way. They can be very hard to find. I remember researching an old family in Philadelphia, and I couldn't confirm the home address. We all knew where they lived, but there was just no record of that information, which is startling, because we feel like real estate is, that's the first place to go. You can always get that. If they own it, you'll know it, but that's not true. So how are we as stewards of our donor data, when, and prospects out there aren't even donors yet, how do you feel when you're researching someone who you're finding very little on? How does that affect what you do?
If I'm not finding much, I'm not too worried about it. It's often the things I do find. And one of the rules that we have, and it is in our stewardship policy, is we don't enter any information or save any information that isn't relevant to the institution and to their mission. Uh, so there are occasions when we find people living double lives or something like that, and we
Mhm.
just don't inform the institution because it's really not part of there. And the answer is we don't keep anything in our files or in our, well, that's untrue. We do have something called a red file. That is where information is given to someone in a private that the institution knows at a very high level, and it should be held for, bus bait type things. So if somebody is ill, they can inform one of the higher executive level people of this issue. And that is not published. That's in closed, locked files, and we call it red files. And the issue is we don't put anything in our data that the donor would not be able to see. So, for example, if we put in their home address and their house value, we would be comfortable showing them that. This is what we did. If you're uncomfortable showing a donor the information you have on them, then don't keep it. So what would the donor expect? Would when say we have a public account of them, would they like to see their giving? Yes, we keep all their giving. Would they like to see the events they attended? Yes, they would like to see those. Do we have meeting notes? Yes, we do. Would we like to show that to them? Well, not really, but we're comfortable showing it to them because that's what it is. Those are the contact reports. So all that type of information we should keep. That information that, somebody has some horrible disease or they have certain issues that they really don't want to make public, we do not, as a policy, keep in our files. We do not add those. Now, we do have criminal activity that we do keep in, so we find certain things, whether it's fraud or something else, and we put that in a special thing called a warning, where they can go and read a written document in files. So we do keep that type of thing too. Any type of things that might cause disrepute to the university, if we associate them, we also keep in a warning, and they can read that. We just don't put it online in our data system. We keep it off in our hard copy files. So we still have hard copy files.
Paper.
Paper. We do. And that's for very narrow things. Criminal activity and things like that are generally public. Personal disputes and other things that are very private aren't. So you have to have and use professional discretion, and you should be led by the donor code of donor rights, and each institution should have that in front and published to the donors of what we do and how we use information and what their rights are with respect to that information. And that's how we handle it.
Let me give you a scenario.
Uh-huh.
I'm still hung up on this wanting to keep a low profile, which many of our prospects have that same problem. So the scenario is that a gift officer reads about someone who gave a big gift in the news. This is typical, right? And we are asked, okay, give us some contact information. I just know that they're going to want to give to us too, or I want to reach out to them. And sometimes, that's public and we can get that information, maybe not a phone number, but certainly an address or a business address or something like that. Great. But what happens when we have that inherited wealth, for example, where you can't even confirm the home address? There's, the business information, but there's no way to really reach that person. And you begin to get the feel that this is someone you can't just reach out to cold. You must know and be in their inner circle, or you're never going to get the time of day. What do you do with that eager beaver gift officer in those situations? How do you communicate sort of your bubbling as theirs?
Well, I think you answered the question with your question, is that you in their inner circle is we look at what is their inner circle, what is their network, and is there somebody we know in that network, so we can work through a third party, and would they volunteer and be part of that? And often they can explain certain protocols that you have to follow to get to this person, or that they will work through it. And we just had one of those issues, and it was all done by the volunteer. And at the last time, at the gift stage, at the solicitation and acceptance, did a DO officer meet with them. And you just see that. And then once that trust has been established, that DO has has a relationship, and they move forward with that. But essentially, that's how we do it, because we understand that doors are closed, and it's a question of opening doors. And are we a match to open that door? And we have to go through that inner circle. And that's also true with, say, the one that the gatekeeper. And there are a lot of gatekeepers out there, and the DOs really, and they should know that they have to establish trust with that gatekeeper.
Yeah.
And that gatekeeper might know someone else, and it's that network of people, and that's one of our big jobs, is to find that network, and then work through that network to get to that gatekeeper. So in that respect, just because the information isn't available doesn't mean we have opportunities to discover pathways. And that's really important. We have done that a lot with our really high capacity donors, because that's really a difficult one. And the networks, we can bring those in with volunteers that are willing, or our donors, to participate in it. It's really unusual to see people that you've tried for 8-10 years to get in touch with, and then all of a sudden you bring in their network and friends and having the dinner, and they show up. And that's
That's so true.
and that's really important, because it is a human event that we're trying to create. And it's not just the data, it is the people that are just being identified with the data.
I've seen lots of tricks and techniques to surface email addresses and phone numbers and stuff, passed around on Prospectel, and that's great. But anytime, I remember it used to be in LexisNexis, you could find like phone numbers on the real estate records that people didn't realize became public. So, you couldn't find their number anywhere else, but you might get lucky if it was on the real estate record. And I was always nervous about passing those along, because the donor had no intention, clearly, of making that public, because you couldn't find it anywhere else. It was just unlisted. And that's what makes me nervous when I see all these tricks to find contact information. Sometimes great, because it's public, but you just had a hard time finding it. But other times it's a trust issue.
Yeah, it's a difference between what is actually public, in that case, on their real estate files that are available to the public. It is public information. The question is, there was an intent to make it public. And that's a problem, because most information, there is often not an intent to make it public, except the law tells you have to make it public. And that's I think that's something we struggle with, but we really shouldn't struggle too much with it, because it's difficult to assign intent to anything. Uncovering somebody's privacies and pretending to friend someone to get information is unethical and shouldn't be done.
Sure.
Yeah, that type of thing where you try and pretend you're someone else, or try to do something else to get that contact information, is unethical, and I don't think should ever be done.
I
That's
agree.
where that's really a bright line is when it's not publicly available in any form, and then you use other means, which are essentially, you know, spying, I guess is the best word,
Yeah.
and using unethical methods to get that information shouldn't be done.
Or coming really close to the line.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Maybe not outright lying or
Yeah.
falsifying or misleading, but taking advantage of an automated system that lets you pretend to be the other person until you get what you want, that kind
Right.
of thing.
Right. Or even pretending to be yourself and friending someone to get the information, where you really have no intention of establishing a relationship with that person. That's also
True.
problematic. So that is completely above board, but you know, I don't think, I think there's a huge difference when talking to someone directly and then sending someone a friend request. I think there is a difference. The difference is
sure.
that the stewardship on the friend request is, oh, I friend everybody and I accept everything because they just can't reject someone. And there are people like that. And I think it's taking advantage of someone. So you don't want to take advantage of someone.
No, absolutely not. But maybe you do. I don't know. So we had talked briefly before, and I would love to just introduce this subject here. And I don't know if anything like this is going on at James Madison University, but the example I like to use is, for example, a museum or a garden, or where you have a place where visitors come, or even performance venues, and you have an app that gives them some kind of value. Maybe it's an audio tour, maybe it's a way to communicate with the band that's playing, I don't know. And once people accept the terms of an app on their phone or sign in via Facebook or Twitter, they're releasing a lot of information to you. And now suddenly you have all this information about how they're engaged with your organization or institution. Maybe it's not clear to the donor or prospect that they've released it. I know a lot of people don't recognize when they sign in via Facebook, they're releasing information to that third-party vendor. When we start to use that for fundraising, are we going to have to revisit all our policies? Like what's on the future horizon for us as researchers when it comes to data? And how do we handle it?
That's a really difficult question. Number one, I think there are a lot of things that say we're going to use this information, and you have opt-in, opt-out methodologies, which are really above board. The other thing is when you're having people engage with you and you are collecting that information. Can it be used for this and can it be used for that? Is it a part of our mission? And one of the things is, for example, if you're museum, particularly a public museum, or even a private museum, is that someone going in there should know that one of the missions is to sustain that museum through fundraising, and that anyone coming in and giving their name and their address. Now the problem is that once they get that app, they didn't freely give you their name, address. It just occurred through accepting that app. But I think by accepting that app, you are giving that same idea that this is me coming in to use your services, that as a fundraiser that you would do it. Now somebody walking by that's not part of the museum and you're collecting that information from them cell phones would probably be a different matter. But I think use of the institution itself, whether it's a library card or something else, will you become part of their community. And as a member of the community, this is one of the things you should expect. You can opt in and opt out.
Right.
And we do have that. Things... Please do not send, and we have opt in and opt out once we do that.
At the point of submission of something.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's where it really is. And the question is, after they've opt out, do you continue? Or when do you say, would you like to opt in again? Is it
Right.
3 months from now? Is it a year from now? Is it 3 years from now? Or is it 5 years? How would things have changed? So an issue that we're looking at right now, is that we've had people that opted out years ago. And should we ask them again if they want to opt back in?
Hmm.
And the question is that we send them a letter to see if they want to opt back in. We do not ask them for money. Would you like to opt in again? I feel better about you now. The issue has gone, gone over, because we always get these. We'll never give another dollar to you for the rest of my life, and 5 years later says, you know, you get a donation. It's kind of weird.
Well, you bring up some good points in terms of like that opt out and opt in, and doing that in a thoughtful and deliberate way, because when you have, let's say you have an app for a museum and you're going to turn on the locator so that the audio tour can run or whatever, but giving them the option even to have that locator on only when the app is running versus all the time, that's an important distinction. And maybe even providing an opportunity to tell them on that app as they're setting it up that you are going to use it to help sustain the mission of the organization. And I'm sure it could be used for lots of different reasons. It could be used to make better exhibits, who knows? But yeah, you can be deliberate about that. And it sounds like the policies you described earlier in our conversation about how you're using data and the red files and, all these different things, that same thoughtful approach could apply to data collected anywhere in your institution.
I think an institution runs a risk if they take information that essentially exclusively in private and they expose it to a broader audience, that will have a greater effect than trying to use that information. And I think that is a question that they constantly, by collecting the, will there be a backlash? And I think there's a balance you constantly have to strike as an institution, as a larger community, on what that participation is, and that will constantly be an issue. And as it becomes broader, as the machines and the technology that we use becomes more and more invasive, those questions it's going to have to be well thought out and deliberate, as opposed to, oh, it's here, we can just use it because it's public.
Or because all the for-profits use it that way. Why can't we?
Right.
Well, we're not for-profit.
Right. Well, yes, even the for-profits are going to, I don't walk in the store because I know that they're facial recognition and that you're leading me to, coupons that spit out as I walk in. Oh, you're here again. This is the deal for you. I think that, that becomes problematic for even for-profit institutions.
It does. There's backlash. Like you said, your IP address is registered. You were searching for hats. And now even if you bought that exact hat, you purchased it, you are still going to see those ads for weeks.
Until you clear off all your cookies and start over again.
And even then, maybe, I just am amazed at how I've been playing with using different browsers to open different kinds, to be logged into different kinds of products. Because I know they're tracking once I'm logged in. And it's challenging. It's very challenging to get all that straight. And there's a lot of benefits to those products that take our data. And I want to use them, but I want to limit how they're controlling my data. And I can only imagine when some newspaper reporter does a story on how we are using donor data, even though I feel like we are so much more thoughtful than the for-profit world. It's still a risk because we're held to a higher standard.
I don't know if we're held to higher standard, but I think it surprises people. They look at it as often as that we're independent of such need and
Oh,
revenue, and that, well, I didn't know they were doing this so they could get money from me, and I think that surprises a lot of people. But it's it shouldn't, but it does. Um, and when you look at data science and big data, there is
mhm.
so much data out there, and you can pull it from all different types of sources. And I mean, there's going to be an ethical issue of what you can and cannot use. Uh, and one of the things is that as researchers, one thing we're really not focusing on is what data should we really be collecting? How should
Mm.
we be storing it? Because I always say, how we collect the data is more important than the data itself. Uh,
Wow.
I have a big issue with contact reports that I've been trying uh, to change for many years, is because most of the information we're asking is standard information that we should know all the time. We should know essentially what the individual's belief in our mission is. Is it positive or negative? What is their feeling about the leadership? Do they have a positive feeling of the leadership or negative feeling about the leadership? Do they feel that their gifts are making an impact? And then, is the money that they give, is it stewarded properly? Do they have a trust in the institution to manage its money and give it to the sources they do? And when I look through contact reports, it's generally they're really not focusing on those four things. So what I thought
Mm.
best is, well, if you want to look at this analytically and um, in a broader institutional level, is that you have to have standard questions that'll have to be answered in a Likert scale, a 10-point scale, a 100-point scale, whatever. They have a great love of the university. They're 100. They really don't like what our mission is. They're a 50. Just moving that down. And if you think of the thousands and thousands of contact reports and individual meetings people have, you essentially have a broader understanding of how the essential the what do they call it, the consumer uh, uh, happiness is, or whatever it is. I call it fiduciary.
Sentiment analysis.
Yeah, and essentially see where we are on those scales as an institution, and are we in a good zone for fundraising? If you have a huge negative on the mission, a huge negative on the leadership, a huge negative on how we manage your money, a huge negative on how their own money is being managed, you're not going to get much fundraising out of it. On the other side, if it's very high, it's going to be very positive. So I think that's really important that we constantly look at those four things uh, and develop how we collect that information, because we have a lot of people besides development officers touching these people. And how are
Mhm.
they informing us on what their belief in the mission is, what their belief in leadership is, what the belief in their giving is, and what the belief in how we are managing our money and or their gifts is. So it's always bad when I think when you mess up a gift and they don't think their account is done well. That is a huge negative. It says that we can't manage the money properly, and that's really important. So when they get their receipts or they get their account or endowment reports, they have to be accurate and perfect. That could cause more problems than anything else. So.
Wow. So it sounds to me like you would like an app on the phone for major gift officers that acts a lot like the TripAdvisor surveys.
Oh,
How would you rate
absolutely.
the cleanliness of the room? 5 stars?
Oh, absolutely. It gives you a good understanding, and you combine all those together, you get a better understanding of your community.
Mhm.
And what you're really trying to do is measure the community as a whole, and then out of that community, pick up focus on the people that are really going to move the mission forward.
And standardized data like that, I mean, it works for TripAdvisor really well. I don't see why it wouldn't work for us in fundraising.
No, it would work.
Cool.
It would be wonderful if we could do that as a larger community of researchers and data analysts. I think it would change how we look at fundraising in itself individually.
Yeah, it could. You get a bigger picture. You could make much better decisions if you knew those four things.
And it would also show you over time how you're doing. So you essentially measure your mission. Instead, we have an alumni survey here, alumni survey there. How does it go? What do they say? But when you put all that data together, this is how our donors feel over this period of time. We have 400,000 independent surveys, because that's what DO is doing. They go out there and survey these people. What do you believe in? Where do you want to get? What do you want to give to? What impact do you want to make? They ask those questions, but how do we essentially manage that information and then provide a service to the development officer to be able to answer those questions quickly without writing? Because writing is the biggest barrier they have. It's one of the most difficult intellectual activities one can have, dealing with form, syntax, meaning, everything. Writing is a very, very difficult intellectual activity, and it is often the barrier. Time, environment, thought processes, sitting down to write is a very difficult task, whereas answering a TripAdvisor report is pretty easy. And then the nuance of that can be added, in a written format, which essentially isn't very conducive to a survey type format. So a mixed methodology would be very, very good.
Well, what an interesting discussion about data and privacy and collecting data and what data points. And I think we'll see constant cycles of this. We just have to apply these same thoughtful, deliberate approaches, no matter what changes. It just changes so fast.
It does.
It's tough to communicate.
Yeah.
Well, before we go, one last question for you. I'm wondering if you have 3 top tips for searching anonymously. You're using different browsers. That's one, maybe. Any other tips before we go for people?
I wish there are a couple. For one, always delete your cookies and have a procedure on your machine when you shut it down that it clears all the cookies from every browser. Remove all your tracking cookies. And then constantly test your searches. And what I mean like this is every once in a while go to a different machine in a different place and with a different IP address and have a search that you test to see if you're getting the same results, to see how your machine has changed. Because even if you do all those things, there's somebody in the background rewriting them. And then I think that's probably one of the easiest things you can do. Now, there are other programs that you can download yourself into your computer that will allow you to browse anonymously.
Like a VPN kind of thing, is that?
No, I can't remember the name of the program right offhand.
Puts you in a tunnel or something, like between you and the changing IP addresses.
Right.
I'm forgetting the name of that too.
Yeah, it's not right off the cuff. But that's what I don't do. That I don't browse anonymously in that way. I'm satisfied with just removing all the cookies. I think it's easier. It also doesn't get into some of those ethical issues that we get involved with. That we talked about earlier. So I think just removing the track, it allows the algorithms to restart. But the IP address is difficult. You have to change essentially your location. or have a different service that you do. And for a lot of people, that's really expensive. I just do it from, I have a different service at my house, so I use that. And sometimes if I go into a public institution like a library and change that, I can do that. And it's just to monitor, and I use the same search all the time just to see what it looks like and how it's changing. And usually it's a person or a thing or a news information that I look for to see what comes up about the subject or the person.
Great. Okay. So really good search hygiene.
No, it is. You have to constantly
clean those cookies.
Yeah, you got to constantly take a shower because you've been out in dirty places.
No cookies in bed.
No
Too many crumbs.
That's right. Exactly. So and keep it simple. I don't want to make people feel paranoid that someone's watching you, even though they are. But there are too many to really focus on you. But that constant cleaning is very helpful. But everybody else around you that is also searching is also changing those algorithms.
I hadn't thought of that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, particularly if you're in a group and you're located in the same area, like our offices is, and we're going through the same IP address, it does cause this narrowing of what you get, and it's remarkable the difference that you see based on those basic changes of location, of service, and of the cookies that you clean. They're completely different.
Great. Well, Martin, thank you so much for sharing with us on Chat Bites. I really appreciate it.
Well, I enjoyed it. You have a wonderful day.
Great. Thank you.
That was Martin O'Donohue, Director of Prospect Research at James Madison University. For more prospect research resources, join us in the Resource Collections community at prospectresearchinstitute.org.